Okay, hello, year 12. Today I'm going to be looking at the poem History, so I'll send it to you in advance so that you can have a chance to read over it first before I do all of these detailed annotations. But even just looking at it, if we just look at it like this, and if we look at it from this perspective, it is very, very fragmented. It looks uncomfortable on the page almost. So you have this kind of um, it's almost like it's just spread out over the page. There are no sort of fixed stanza lengths, and basically the it has this kind of erratic structure, almost like falling or collapsing. Which, when we talk about the context of the poem, you might be able to appreciate a bit further why that might be the case. So, just giving you a little bit of background about the context of the poem. So this poem was written in so he gives us a very specific location here. St Andrews, West Sands, September 2001. Which actually, more specifically, it was written on 9/11. And the reason why the place is significant is because it was near an airbase, and it is one of those moments in time where everyone talks about where were you. And this is John Burnside telling us exactly where he was at this particular moment in time, and just basically the thoughts that come through his head, come to his mind at this point. I will be uploading all of these annotations, so if some of them seem a bit blurry because of my shaky hands, then you should be able to see them better when I upload them. So we'll just do sort of a stanza by stanza. So today, as we flew the kites, the sand spinning off in ribbons along the beach, and the gasoline smell from looters gusting across the golf links, the tide far out and quail grey in the distance. So that single word line, it makes it seem like an unfinished thought, but also it gives the idea of today a lot of significance. As we flew the kites, flying a kite, as we know, symbolizes freedom. It symbolizes also control, though, as well. Just the idea of being somewhere and enjoying a moment. The sand spinning off in ribbons along the beach. So just this visually satisfying image. Also the idea of the sand spinning off in ribbons, action plus consequence. And if we think about things like 9/11, actions and consequences become even more symbolic and important. And the gasoline smell from looters, I don't know how to say that, gusting across. So gasoline smell. It's a small town. Looters is a small town with an Air Force base. So that combination, it's interesting. Throughout the poem, we have this combination that I've written up here somewhere. So there's a frequent contrast between concrete and abstract. So the beautiful visuals of the kite, the ribbons, floating across the sky, and then that kind of very harsh smell of the gasoline coming from the airbase kind of brings us back to the reality of what the situation is. Gusting across the golf links. So you got that contrast. The tide far out and quail grey in the distance. That quail grey, like neutral, bland, kind of almost like nothingness. So that first stanza is setting us very much in within the moment, where the poet is. I just realized I might be covering up the mic, which wouldn't be good. Where the moment is at, right? The poet is at. So the speaker is here with his son. People, and look at this kind of odd position. It's almost like a I don't know what that word is, but unusual position of the wording there at the very end. People, almost like a bit of an afterthought, jogging or stopping to watch as the warplanes cambered and turned in the morning light. Basically, it creates a cycle of normal life continuing, but also it's interrupted as well. The warplanes cambered and turned. You have people's normal lives interrupted by this unusual event. Today, this use of anaphora here, being the repetition of today from earlier, with the news in my mind and the muffled dread of what may come. Muffled dread. So he's acknowledging that the security of his old life is now officially over. That muffled dread, is that a case of denial, of trying to kind of protect your own consciousness by not engaging fully with what this might mean? The muffled dread of what may come. And the use here of the dash is it extends the horror. Um, I knelt down in the sand with Lucas, gathering shells and pebbles. I love the kind of positioning of this on one side of the page and then the other side and then the other side. This kind of chaotic structure here, it really, um, I feel like it really emphasizes that sort of the stream of consciousness, but also the fragmented nature of his life from here on in. So the poet creates a poignant contrast between the violence of events unfolding and the natural serenity of playing on a beach with a child. Um, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that after 9/11 everyone's lives changed. You know, it was an attack that basically stayed with all of us. And I feel like this is what he's getting at here, the structure of the poem, fragmented, torn apart. Um, Finding evidence of life in all this drift work. Finding evidence of life as well. That's kind of an eerie mirroring of what rescue services would have been doing in New York City exactly this time. But he's finding evidence of life in a not obviously in a more of an explorative, curious way. Snail shells, shreds of razor fish, smudges of weed and flesh on the tide worn stone. That sort of the use of sibilants there is quite interesting too. Um, the small minutiae of life, the small pieces that make up life, the shell of the snail, the shred of the razorfish, the smudge, nothing is whole. It's all parts of a whole, basically. It's very, very visceral. Um, and it's kind of intertwined as well with the idea of the loss of life, the visceral loss of life as well. The idea that we are not, we don't just leave behind one body. We're all, there's lots of different things there. This stanza seems a little bit more together. Sorry, trying to make it focus a little bit better. At times, I think what makes us who we are is neither kinship nor our given states, but something lost between our world, the world we own, and what we dream about behind the names. So sorry, excuse me. This is really interesting here because it's deeply like philosophical idea that our identity can be formed by a lack or a loss in terms of human aspiration. So it's something that what between the world that we lose, something is lost between the world that we own, something familiar, and what we dream about behind the names. It's this idea of what makes us who we are, really. On days like this, our lines raised in the wind, that's the kite, going back to the kite metaphor as well, but our lines raised in the wind, there's a sense of collectivity there. The fact that the whole community is kind of looking up as well. Our bodies fixed and anchored to the shore. There's a sense of certainty here in the moment of emergent chaos. The idea of the bodies fixed and anchored to the shore, but also as there's this sense of connection here, isn't there? Okay, so continue, and I'm sorry if this makes you guys seasick because I'm moving so much. And though we are confined by property, what tethers us to gravity and light has most to do with distance and the shapes we find in water. So he's basically grappling with the difficult, complex idea of meaning and identity. Sorry, I'm going to just do this to see if I can make it focus better. And this pressure of like confined. So, and though we are confined by property, which is obviously the adult world of mortgages and restrictions, what tethers us to gravity and light, so basically what keeps us alive, what gives us meaning, has most to do with distance and the shapes we find in water. I wonder, is he talking about the distance between being a child and developing into a grown up, and the shapes we find in water might be referencing the meaning that we find in life? Reading from the book of silt and tides, the rose or petrol blue, these like vivid colours are emerging, of jellyfish and sea anemone combining with the child's first nakedness. So you have this kind of these intangible experiences versus the tangible as well. The innocence, the sensory experiences is tied to memories and tied to an ideology as well, an ideological like viewpoint of innocence and preservation as well. Um, I also wonder as well about the rose, or reading from the book of Silt and Tide, the rose or petrol blue of jellyfish and sea anemone, combining with a child's first nakedness. I almost feel like you could also argue that there's like the sting, the danger, alongside the kind of vulnerability of a child's skin. I'm not sure if he's looking at kind of the potentially he's looking at the proximity of danger close to human life. Um, then we have another stanza which looks like it's a little bit more together. Sometimes I am dizzy with the fear of losing everything. The sea, the sky, all living creatures, forest, estuaries. We trade so much to know the virtual, we scarcely register the drift and tug of other bodies. I really love this stanza because I feel he kind of composes himself to come up with this kind of idea. He's trying to find a balance. So it's his natural response to the chaotic, violent events. And he's saying that we've relinquished our grasp on the natural world around us. So I'm dizzy with the fear of losing everything: the sea, the sky, all living creatures, all of these beautiful, beautiful natural resources that we have. And that idea of trading so much to know the virtual. So I feel like what he means there is that we basically sacrifice so much for uncertainty. Investments, business transactions, we scarcely register the drift and tug of other bodies. And that also is very viscerally mirroring 9/11 and in those moments, the drift and tug of other bodies that we all combine, and we all kind of, we drift and tug, we drift away from each other, we pull at each other. Scarcely apprehend the moment as it happens, shifts of life and weather, um, shifts of the light, sorry. We're losing touch. We're losing touch in the most important sense of um, the important elements of life. Um, so just to go through I've got some structural and form points I'll make at the end. Um, Scarcely apprehend the moment as happens, the shifts from light and weather in the quiet local forms of history, the fish lodged in the tide beyond the sands, the long insomnia of ornamental carp in public parks, captive and bright, and hung in their own slow burning transitive gold. Just pausing there, we've got the ornamental carp, the goldfish given as a prize um, on the as a prize in the fairground, a sense of elation at winning things. And then the goldfish bowl could also be seen as symbolic of the world's eyes on New York City as well. Ornamental carp in in public parks, captive and bright, and hung in their own slow burning, transitive gold jam jars of spa. Um, yeah, I feel like it's this idea that we capture we capture life, and then so in doing so we lose something perhaps. Just moving on to the next page. And sticklebacks, or goldfish carried home from fairgrounds to the hum of radio. So in a way, it's the poet implying that our memories all kind of sensorily um are attached as or to our conscious and are integral to our identity. So all of these memories, like sticklebacks, goldfish carried home, grounds, the hum of the radio, it reminds me of to my 9-year-old self, like that, those nostalgia for, like, for something meaningful, for something you can touch and feel, and something you can um look back on. But this is the problem: how to be alive in all this gazed upon and cherished world and do no harm. This is the question, isn't it, of life, really? How do we exist here? Every day we exist in this world, we're causing more and more harm. If you think about climate change, if you think about global warming, etc., how can we look at this beautiful world and not do any harm? How can we be here and not create chaos? So, how can we exist harmoniously when we have lost touch with our own experiences? So, how can we basically do that? Now, he returns to his present of what he's doing right now. A toddler on a beach, dried weed from the sand, and puzzled by the pattern on a shell. And this is where he finds meaning. Um, Life goes on, and the toddler's like imperviousness to all of this is what matters. He's got this sort of he's he's exploring everything as if for the first time. He's seeing everything for the first time. He's not the speaker who is now grappling with a disaster. He's grappling with a mass loss of life that none of us can comprehend. This is a toddler sifting through the sand and seeing everything for the first time. His parents on the dune slacks with a kite plugged into the sky, all nerve and line. Here we have the solidity of their anchor plugged into the sky, though, has that kind of concrete technological connotations as well. All nerve and line, I think, is a beautiful, beautiful phrasing there. Nerve, maybe pointing to the fear of having a child and watching your child grow up, and are you ever really fully relaxed? Can you ever really fully sit back and not feel that sense of nerve at them growing up, perhaps? Patient, afraid, but still through everything, attentive to the irredeemable. So this is biblical connotations here. So Christ is the Redeemer. We fear what we have lost, but we try to preserve it still. We fear what we've lost, but we still try to preserve it. Patient, afraid, but still through everything, attentive to the irredeemable. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this in class as well. Please don't feel like this is the only time we'll look at this poem. Obviously, my COVID-filled brain is probably not doing it much good, but let's have a little look at some of the things regarding the form and structure. So you have this kind of like a sense of um, loss and confusion, unfinished lines. The whole poem is only actually 3 stretched out sentences, which actually adds to this idea of the stream of consciousness, the idea that basically he's writing as he's thinking, and he wants, the question he's asking himself throughout is what makes us who we are, what makes us where we are, and what gets us to the point where we're at in life. We've got the allusions to 9/11 here, the fear of the unknown, of course, the importance of humanity, living without harming each other. There's no rhyming scheme, as I've said. It's a 3-stanza poem, no consistent metrical pattern, which gives it an observational, pensive feel. Lots of unfinished thoughts bleeding into each other. And these fractured thoughts, then, it creates an illusion of spontaneous stream of consciousness, as I've said. And it could also be linked, as we'll see when we study the Romantic poets soon, to the sublime, the beauty of nature. The idea that in a way we almost don't deserve what we have right in front of us. And how do you, like the same way that Keats looks at the natural world and tries to basically weigh it up alongside the industrial destruction of rural areas, and he's just basically asking, why do we deserve this? This is, we need to basically preserve this. And I feel like that's what John Burnside is doing as well. Okay, so I am going to leave it there. Just keep annotating it. Just use these annotations, add your own annotations, and keep considering the frequent contrast between concrete and abstract throughout as well. It's really, really important. The idea of what it is he needs to preserve and the message he's trying to get across. I'm incredibly sorry that I can't be with you tomorrow. As I'm sure you've guessed, COVID caught me in the end. And I am resting. But I hope this is helpful. And again, I'm sorry to make you guys have to work on your own tomorrow, but I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine. Have a fantastic, restful Easter. And Elsa, what's this? What's this? And Elsa says Happy Easter as well. You say Happy Easter? Okay, have a lovely Easter, guys. Take care. Bye.